Epiphany today about elections, and I always had a little bit of an idea of this, a little bit about myself. I've actually been pretty involved in politics, at least from behind the scenes for a while. Way back in 2012, I was head of the 30th Congressional District for the Youth for Ron movement, or campaign, and I campaigned for Ron Paul 2012, and for those of you who don't know, might be younger or just wasn't really paying attention politically, 15 years ago, Ron Paul was like the blueprint for grassroots, modern day grassroots politics, and Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders both totally hijacked Ron Paul's campaign. In fact, Bernie Sanders stole Ron Paul's logo when Bernie Sanders ran for president in 2016. Something about campaigning for Ron Paul is Ron Paul was really shafted. Famously, he was he had second. He was polling second behind Mitt Romney and above everyone else. Even leaders like Newt Gingrich and people like that who had been in lifetime politics on the right. And Ron Paul very well could have beaten Barack Obama. Well, for sure to debate. But Ron Paul, very principled, and went viral many times with a lot of his stances. But famously, 2012, he was made invisible. When they were talking about the note, they would be like, Mitt Romney's first, and then everyone else behind him. Second, we have another candidate, and they would literally disappear Ron Paul. It would just be a silhouette of a head. And then we have Newt Gingrich, and then we have the other guys, and they would name every single other guy, including people who were polling at 1%. But Ron Paul had 16, 17% or whatever. So me having campaigned for Ron Paul and experiencing that really got me disenfranchised politically. I was really unhappy with the political process because I put a lot of hours, lots of late nights, phone banking, climbing on top of buildings, hanging inside and stuff. Because Ron Paul was a very principled candidate. He didn't care about the party. He's always principled over party. He didn't care about risking anything. Ron Paul had a famous quote that is often used today. He was the first to say it, at least recorded saying it. He said, "Truth is treason in the empire of lies." So that's the type of guy Ron Paul was. That's the type of candidate I believed in could be president one day. That's who I was fighting for. And I had this idea that when you run for a position of power, whether it be mayor of a city or governor or president, you really want to do that. You actually want to get the position, and you want to make significant change in that position. That's what I believed, and that's what I believed for a very, very long time. But then it really hit me, especially what's going on right now in California, that parties collude to pretend to disagree. They collude to pretend to want to be the person of principle, to want to make a difference with their ideas. And then they put all the chips in for their party. It's very, very evident right now in the state of California. The state of California, if you look at who's running for governor in the state of California, it's a very, very long list of people running for governor, and most of which are someone you haven't heard of. But when I see the amount of Democrats who are running for governor, it's 20 at least. And then there's a couple Republican candidates. What happens every primary, and this is getting worse and worse, is you'll have mudslinging, like, don't trust Tom Steyer, he's a billionaire. Or don't trust Matt Mahan, he has donors who are billionaires. That sort of BS. And then it gets to, like, right before the election, and then all of a sudden, all of media, it's like, oh, Becerra is the man. He's going to be the best governor ever. But Becerra wasn't even polling in, like, 10% until, like, a week and a half ago. He never won a debate. He never had a great media outing. He had events in LA where he has a lot of influence. He had events in LA where there were empty rooms, just like Biden had during COVID. And meanwhile, he's going up against other candidates who had bigger showings, and against Republican candidates who are filling out rooms where people are spilling out the doors. But all of a sudden, this happens every primary, right before it gets time for people to get to the polls. You have all the Democratic candidates disappear except for one, and then this is the guy that they think is the best, whereas no one is even showing up to these events publicly. There isn't any record of him actually, winning a debate, and they're actually even out there right now during this election cycle, where there's news interviews that did not go well for Becerra, and it made him look like a big asshole. But this guy who is very unlikable, is all of a sudden polling at 20%, while the two Republican candidates combined are polling at like maybe 30%. So what I noticed, and the epiphany I came to, was, oh, that's how the Democratic Party does it. They get 20 to 30 different candidates for one position, and they all drum up a lot of interest. And then right before the election, like, hey, I know I didn't get the numbers I wanted, but hey, you should vote for this guy if you want the Democrats to stay in power. And you have that alongside going on in a state like California, where there's nearly 40 million people in the state of California, 20 million of which are registered Republicans. And the people keep in every election cycle increasing in amount. These Republicans will go out to the polls, and more and more percentage growing. And actually what happened during the last election, which was a special election where they tried to recall Governor Newsom, was we had millions of Republicans come out and say, we're tired of Governor Newsom's BS. This train that went to nowhere. I can't take it anymore. I can't keep my business. I can't handle the unhoused prices on the front lawn of my house or right across the street from my kids' school. I'm tired of my kids seeing naked homeless people right down the street. Yeah, we're going to recall Governor Newsom. And then what goes and happens is they'll go ahead and count all the blue districts first. When they tried to recall Governor Newsom, they counted like Marin County, the bluest county in the country, first. And then they got that all the way counted. And then they got a couple more super blue counties. It's not looking good for the Republican vote. We're going to call it. And the polling for the special election ended at 8 o'clock, and they called the vote at 8:30, saying, well, we're at like 10%. not looking good for Republicans. That's it. I guess Governor Newsom wasn't recalled. And then they changed rules on how to become governor, and it made it harder for the guy who was the front runner, Larry Elder. They made it harder for him to become governor, and they, made a rule book of 500 pages that says now you have to follow all these rules to become governor, and you can't become governor if you have a radio show. That's one of the rules they added, and Larry Elder at the time had a radio show. So now Larry Elder, unless he gives up his business, which he makes his livelihood from, he will not be able to ever run for governor again. So that's collusion going on here in the state of California. It's just like Formula One, where every year they have it, they change the rules to make it harder and harder for people to compete. But what's going on here in the state of California, which is worse than anywhere in the country, you'll have 50 candidates, and then right before it gets time to vote, they all throw their money in behind one candidate, and you have what goes from actually people who want to become governor and make a difference to, actually we're all just doing it for the party, and we want our party to stay in power because we like our party and we like to keep our party. Katie Porter doesn't actually want to be governor. Becerra is just a career politician who's going to be a puppet, does whatever they do. Tom Steyer threw $220 million into this election to try and become governor, and all of the Democratic Party turned against him because you're not our guy, because you're not like Donald Trump, who's a billionaire, who paid for his own campaign as well. You aren't we can't manipulate you, so you're not our guy. Becerra is our guy. We don't care how much influence, how good you are at your job. We want a guy who's gonna follow the carrot on our stick to do what we want you to do. That's why California, under Governor Newsom, has lost $290 billion to this high-speed rail to nowhere. That's how tens more billions of dollars have been spent on fraud. That's how the state of California is trying to pass the Stop Nick Shirley Act. I forget the number, but stipulating that you can't do investigative journalism on fraud. And also, if someone who has done fraud loses money after an investigative journalist, that person will be reimbursed by the state. That's in the bill, the Stop Nick Shirley Act. So this is just horrible BS that Californians are stuck in, this horrible cycle. And that's just at the state level. Civically, we're really fucked in cities like Los Angeles. We have Karen Bass, who literally let her 20,000 people lose their homes on her watch, knew a big fire was coming, and simultaneously cut the funding to the fire department. And when the fire chief disagreed with her, the fire chief was fired, and Karen Bass went away to Ghana to do some diplomatic trip in the middle of the worst conditions for a fire there had been in 50 years in the state of California. It's particularly in the LA area. And go figure, during these horrible conditions that were happening, the 20,000 houses burned down in the Palisades. This horrible candidate who blamed everyone else but herself, including suing the state of California to get the money that her city lost to 20,000 homes burning down. This person who's blamed everyone else, this person somehow is leading in the polls over Spencer Pratt, the guy who lost his house. The guy who lost his house to that fire. The guy who ran one of the most influential campaigns in modern history in city government. The guy who's doing an amazing job. Somehow, this guy with tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of views on his campaign, is losing to Karen Bass, one of the worst candidates in mayoral history of any city. We're talking like worse than Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago bad. So there is a lot of evidence that the city of LA is dealing with a lot of really shisty stuff, including what's going on right now, today even. Multiple polling sites had their ballot boxes ripped out of the ground and had all of the ballots stolen, on the watch of like who's supposed to be protecting these ballots in the city of LA. And it's a city that, by the way, LA has way more influence nationally than people like to think, because the media is there, and you have a city, it's the city alone with 9 million people, which is the second most populous in the country behind New York City. But what's actually, LA is connected to the biggest county in the nation. 23 million people live in LA County. That is more than half of the state of California's population lives in LA County, an area that is only about 100 square miles. And LA County has more people living in it than 45 states in the United States. And that is why all of these people from all over the world ended up in LA to do all this fraud, because there's all this money there, and there's all these crooked politicians who like get away with doing horrible shit like what Karen Bass has done. And if you really look at Nick Shirley's stuff on YouTube, you'll see like how much horrible shit was going on in the state of California. But that sort of shit does not happen unless there's a ton of corruption and a ton of collusion, like what has been going on in the United States, particularly in the state of California, for years and years. I would say it's been going on in the state of California for at least 2 decades, because we've seen it get worse and worse and worse and worse. And now in this last election cycle, my faith in politics is lower than it's ever been, because I mean, Trump and all the crap he has to deal with, and all the crap Biden did, and all the crap, like, all that's one thing, but I expect that nationally, because it's just a clusterfuck what's going on in the United States. But what's going on in California is an example of what's going to go on in the rest of the country if we don't stop it now, particularly in the LA area with that amount of crooked bullshit that's going on. Again, 20,000 people lost their homes. Only like 8 of them have been able to start rebuilding. On top of that, you have another 40,000 people in the past 2 weeks who have been evacuated because some chemical plant started leaking toxic fumes. And seriously, this is shit that just happens in LA. And I could speak to it because I lived in LA for 4 years, and I hated it. And that's a low bar, because I grew up in the Bay Area, and things are pretty shysty up here in a lot of areas. But LA, it was like on another level how like shysty it was. But I'm just trying to do my part in like spreading the word on this and how bad it is. If you're in the state of California, at least vote. I know there's a chance that your ballot's going to get stolen, your ballot's going to get disappeared, it's going to get kidnapped, like taken away from these polling places. Some of them burnt, like what was found in LA. But still, if you don't vote, you're not even like part of the process, and you're not even helping change the. And we'll see what happens tomorrow, the actual day of the primary. Obviously, if you're on the right and you want someone on the right to actually have a chance at governor, our way of doing that, our best chance is getting Bianco and Steyer in. But if we don't get them in, we're really screwed. So, and not only that, and this is what people forget about primaries, you also get to vote on other things, like who the state superintendent is. That's the person in charge of all of schools, of public schools in the state of California. That's actually a really important position. Thrown in my, kudos to Sonia Shaw there, who's actually trying to run a grassroots campaign. It's hard to do in the state of California. But if you don't vote in the primary, you're not even voting for not just governor, but those sort of people. Often you'll have sheriffs on those things. So really, vote. Get out there and vote. And anyways, that's it for me. I know I went for a long time there. Thanks for watching. Have yourselves a good one, guys.